Hello, I'm Charles Bowman, and today we're at the Bank of England on Threadneedle Street in the City of London, where somewhere in the vaults beneath us sit 400,000 bars of gold with a market value of some $200 billion. We're here today to talk to the CFO of the Bank of England, Afua Kyei. While these gold reserves may not sit on the bank's balance sheet, Afua is responsible for assets of over £875 billion and ensuring that the bank's financial governance and long-term strategy deliver economic stability to the UK. She is one of the most important people in British finance. Afua is the first ethnic minority woman to rise to the bank's executive and has been instrumental in creating a more diverse and inclusive culture as the co-sponsor of DE&I. She's consistently recognised as the most influential black woman in Britain by both Powerlist and Empower, and counts a wealth of other awards to her name. Afua believes in taking risks and being flexible, and you can see that in the twists and turns of her career to date. She read chemistry at Oxford because she wanted to create a drug to help people with cancer. But after pursuing a master's and a junior research fellowship at Princeton University, she decided that her future didn't lie beneath a feudal. She qualified as a chartered accountant with EY, then moved into investment banking at UBS and Barclays, working on some of the most complex transactions of the 2008 global financial crisis. She finally arrived at the Bank of England 6 years ago. As she advised a group of students in a recent speech, don't worry if you don't have a fixed plan. Lots of people don't, and I certainly didn't. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Afua Kyei to Off the Agenda. Afua, welcome to Off the Agenda, and thank you for hosting us in this magnificent environment that is the Bank of England. I'm going to start with growing up and education. Tell me perhaps about your family. What influence did your parents have on you and your upbringing? Were you ambitious as a young child, and were there any particular obstacles that you had to overcome?
My parents moved to the UK from Ghana to study around 1970 when they were 18, and my parents met probably about 10 years later and then got married and had us children. And going back to my father, he is very academic, very bright, and he came third in his A-levels in the whole of West Africa. And so the government of Ghana actually sponsored him to have a scholarship to come and study here in the UK. And he studied at the Camborne School of Mines, and then Birmingham, and then London. And he's had a very distinguished career in the oil industry, working in leadership roles at firms like Phillips and BP and Tullow Oil. And then going back to my mother, she moved to the UK to study at Liverpool University, where she trained to become a midwife. And she enjoyed a 40-year plus career working for the NHS. And what I saw growing up was that my parents were both incredibly passionate about their careers and about their work, and that rubbed off on me and my siblings. And thinking about sort of what values my parents instilled in us, there was very much a strong emphasis on education, on discipline, on hard work, and also they instilled in us really strong social values. And I grew up very much in a community surrounded by friends, family, church, and I think that would have given me a really strong sense of self-confidence and self-belief, because I was encouraged to try out different things, and I think that's had a very big influence.
I mentioned ambition when you were growing up, and clearly you have been ambitious, but what does that look like? What did it feel like for you, ambition?
I guess looking back, I must have been pretty ambitious. I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help people. And I knew that if I wanted to be a doctor, then I needed to have top-notch grades. So I worked hard to get the grades. And I had a deep interest in science, and I had a love for languages, particularly modern languages. And that probably explains why I did 6 A levels. And I jumped a year in school, so I actually went to Oxford University when I was 17. But aside from the academics, I was really social, and I had a whole variety of interests. So I was involved in music, I was sporty, I was interested in drama, I volunteered at the homeless shelter at university, I worked at Oxfam, I did Bronze and Silver Duke of Edinburgh Award, and we also started a company which was under the Young Enterprise Scheme, and we won Best Company in Croydon, which was the borough in which I grew up. And so I was ambitious in the sense that I always had loads of different interests, and I was very social. And so I think that's, been a key part. I've always had lots of interests.
It was nothing ventured, nothing gained mindset that you had. And was that encouragement came from parents, sibling, and the context within which you grew up?
I grew up thinking that I could try everything. I was very much encouraged to sort of just pursue my interests, and so I literally did try lots of different things, and I was interested in lots of different things, and so I had a variety of interests, and that brought me into contact with lots and lots of different people. So socially, I had different social groups that I was part of, and I was always loving being around people, whether that was at church or whether that was amongst family members or whether that was amongst friends. And even now I've got a very eclectic set of friends, because I still have lots and lots of different interests, and my friends span all sorts of different demographics and generations.
Fantastic. We live in challenging times where hope and aspiration are in short supply. What advice and encouragement would you give to the younger and next generation as they start out on their own career path?
Okay, so can I say a little bit about my journey? I, as you said, have changed course a few different times, and there have been different challenges along the way, in the sense that I couldn't always get the experience that I wanted to be able to get the job that I wanted. So I have done things in a sort of zigzag way. So for example, I initially wanted to be a doctor, and I didn't have any experience in healthcare or working for a hospital or anything like that. But what I did have was a lot of volunteering experience. And so that was how I was able to demonstrate that sort of I cared about society. And so had I decided to pursue medicine, that would have been one way that I would have gone about it. I then decided that I wanted to be a research chemist, but I didn't have experience. And so while I was at Oxford, I volunteered to work in the chemistry labs, the organic chemistry labs, during my holidays. And through that, I was able to apply successfully to Princeton University, where I was awarded a junior research fellowship. And while I was at Princeton, I remember thinking about the world of business, which I saw as more fast-paced. And if I rewind back to about 2000, when I was just about to go to university, I got a part-time job working the holidays, working for Burberry, which was going through a big brand transformation. So you'll remember the Burberry check, the plaid, and Burberry was trying to position itself as a luxury brand. And I was working in the new flagship store in Mayfair. And we had, coming into the store every day, lots of international customers from all over the world, and also Londoners, tourists, everything. And I was working as part of a team of colleagues, and so I had friends, and we would talk to each other and we'd talk about sales and commission, because we were all being paid commission. And we'd talk about how to get the stock up from the stockroom up to the floor. We'd talk about branding. We'd talk about what went into the window. And that really got me thinking about a career in the world of commerce. And, it was very much a case of you could see the results of your work quickly because we were making commission. Now, by contrast, I was an organic chemist working in the labs. And so if you can picture it, I was going to the labs every day and I'd be putting on my white coat, my white lab coat and my big goggles. And I'd be standing behind my fume hood working in a vacuum. It was pretty isolated and not so socially interactive. I sought collaboration, but you had to go out of your way to really sort of collaborate. It wasn't an innate part of doing the research. And of course, a career in research chemistry is a very long path. I discovered that I'd need to do a PhD and a couple of postdocs. And so I realized that I wanted to do something more fast-paced and something where the results were more immediate. And I therefore decided to pivot. And so all of this is to say that from an advice perspective, from an encouragement perspective, don't worry if you don't tick all the boxes, and don't worry if you don't have the obvious experience. Don't be intimidated. Just make the most of what you have, because actually what you're building are transferable skills that you can use in other areas. And then secondly, what I would say is don't worry if you don't have a plan. Zigzagging is okay. You'll get there in the end. And finally, I would say what's really important is to build relationships. And as much as people coming up through their careers and people who are already established in their careers might be thinking about the risks that AI poses to sort of the labour market, what's really important is relationship building and drawing on our innate human strengths and building those and making the most of what we have. And therefore, I would say, go for it.
Fantastic. Don't be intimidated. Don't worry about the plan per se. Build relationships and go for it. Reference career. Perhaps we'll move on to the early part of your career. You drew away from science ultimately to become a chartered accountant, and then you moved into banking. Did science actually play a role in terms of the approach you've applied to leadership and more, and some of the decisions you've taken in later life?
I would say that science has absolutely influenced how I approach leadership. So, for example, I grew up experimenting in labs, and so I really embrace innovation. I love to try new approaches. I'm very much, if it hasn't been done, well, let's try it. Let's see how far we can get. And I bring that into how I think about problems. I'd say that science has also given me a very strong foundation in problem solving, in analytics, and also in making evidence-based judgments. But, if I think about it, what really strikes me is that people don't always understand how relevant science is in leadership. And if I explain myself a bit more fully, Margaret Thatcher was clearly the first female British Prime Minister, and she read chemistry at Somerville College, which is where I read chemistry. And I met Angela Merkel towards the end of last year, and she is also a chemist by background and by academic sort of training. And she too rose to become the first female leader when she became the Chancellor of Germany. So I think there's something in that. And I think people don't always appreciate how much of a solid foundation science gives you and how versatile it is in terms of helping you to lead and influence at the highest level.
And is there any recommendation you would give to that next generation in relation to keep science going through school, maybe beyond?
I'm a big fan of STEM, and I really do think that the younger generation should appreciate the opportunities that a career in STEM can provide. And it's not necessarily the case that you'll be pigeonholed into a career in STEM, but actually it's the skills that you develop and the experiences that you have that can actually be passported to a whole number of things. And so keep the options open, and STEM is always a good thing.
Fantastic. So, science through to accountancy, then into banking, and now to the Bank of England. And you stepped into your role here at the Bank of England just as your maternity leave ended, becoming the youngest executive on the team and the first black person also to hold an executive position in the bank's 350-year history. What did that moment feel like for you, and how did it shape your sense of purpose?
When I joined the Bank of England, or actually let me go back. So I went through a very rigorous process to become the CFO of the Bank of England, and it culminated with an interview by the former governor, Mark Carney. And I remember throughout the interview process really loving all the conversations that I was having with the people who I met. And I really felt deeply, this is somewhere where I will really like working. And I loved the fact that this institution has real impact on society, that the decisions that we make influence every household in the UK. And I wanted to be part of that. And having had a career in the private sector, as you say, as a chartered accountant, as a banker, it was a really rare opportunity, I thought, to be able to use the skills that I'd gained in the private sector, in the public sector, in banking, really at the heart of, the UK economy and financial system. And so it felt deeply purposeful. But actually, it's a beautiful building, and you can't help but feel energized, and it's really uplifting anytime you walk through the great front doors downstairs. And did you know we've actually got an exhibition on at the moment in the Bank of England Museum where you can learn all about the bank's architecture and building. So I'd definitely recommend that to anyone who might be interested.
I think that's an important point for our listeners, and we should encourage it. Absolutely. Maybe a tiny bit more about the museum, because it's tucked on the left-hand wing of the of the bank, and it's an extraordinary feature of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. But after 330 years, how do you see, you've talked about the culture, the importance of the Bank of England. How do you see it, often referred to by its nickname, the Old Lady of Threadneedle Street, today? What's its key role in providing that security for our country, and where might it move forward to in the future?
Well, first and foremost, we need to keep prices low and stable. And we need to protect the value of our money. And we need to make sure that the cost of living is affordable for everyone. And it's also really important that as regulator of the financial services industry, that we ensure that the banks, building societies and insurers are all run effectively. And also that we remember the learnings from the global financial crisis. What's also important as we think ahead is that the Bank of England also has a secondary objective to support government economic policy. And so through our committees, for example, the Prudential Regulation Authority, the PRA, we have the PRA has a secondary objective to support competition and to support competitiveness and growth. So that's how we influence more broadly. But, as we look forward, those are the key, that's our key role, and that's where we will continue to focus.
Tremendous, and it's a wonderful juxtaposition, as you rightly say, between the old 330 years, a magnificent building, and being very relevant and purposeful in the modern day. Perhaps looking at that future, of course, AI is something that's on the tip of everybody's tongue at this moment in time. And the Bank of England, I know, is establishing an AI consortium as a sort of public-private forum to gather input on capabilities, development and the use of AI more widely within financial services here in the UK. What can we expect from that, from the bank and more?
Well, as you say, we launched this consortium back in May, the AI consortium, and the idea is that we convene a broad range of stakeholders. I think we've got something like 26 AI experts, and we discuss across the public sector, across the private sector, the developments, the challenges, the capabilities of AI. And what we are keen to ensure is that there is responsible use of AI throughout the financial system, and we need to understand the developments. So what we have been doing is facilitating discussion. And we actually published the first set of minutes back in July, I think. And so it's, I'd say watch this space.
And do you have a personal perspective on how AI is going to impact and affect financial services in the UK and globally as we progress forward?
Firms increasingly and individuals are also using AI and leveraging the benefits of AI to enhance core decision making and also to enhance productivity and efficiency gains. But amidst that, there are clearly systemic risks, there are operational risks such as cyber threats. And so we will need to keep a close eye on that so that we can ensure that the use of AI is responsibly managed, and so that we have a good understanding of the systemic risks that might evolve over time.
Understood. One of the many roles at the bank is being the co-exec sponsor for DE&I. And how do you think we ensure that DEI does remain a meaningful and strategic part of how companies operate in today and tomorrow's environment?
I think, first of all, we must remind ourselves of why DEI was ever important. And for me, the overarching principle is equality. And we also have to remind ourselves of the business case. And for me, there are two key ones. So customer centricity, whether you're a public sector institution or a private sector institution. From a public sector perspective, it's important that we represent the society that we're serving. So representing the public is important. And from a private sector perspective, it's important for organizations to understand their customer, to be able to relate to their customer, to engage with their customer and understand the challenges and the needs of their customer. And what better way to do that than to actually have a workforce that represents the customers that you're trying to appeal to so that you can grow. And also so that you can innovate and find new approaches to upcoming challenges. I'd say the second part of that would be resilience. It's really important that organizations can draw on diverse sets of experience, skills, backgrounds, perspectives to create new solutions to problems as they arise and to avoid groupthink. And I think it makes institutions more resilient, more fit for the purpose, and better to weather the storms ahead. So I think we need to remember the business case.
That's a very important point. And of course, all of this is happening at a time when across the pond, within the current US administration, there is an active sense of rolling back a number of the DE&I initiatives. And you've spoken about the importance of building teams that reflect both visible and invisible diversity. So in this climate, to the point about the importance of business case, are there any practical steps that you believe organisations can take to ensure that it's not just tick box, but actually part of the strategy of how businesses and institutions develop?
I think first and foremost, we must remember that where strategic initiatives have been put in place in the past, they were there for a reason, and to hold ourselves to account and say, have those strategic initiatives actually delivered as they were intended to? And I am a firm believer in targets. You'd expect that with me being a CFO. I believe that what gets measured gets done. And therefore, it's important to look back at any targets that have been set and to say, have these targets been met? If yes, is it sustainable? If not, why not? Are there underlying things that need to be resolved? And I would add to that and say, it's really important to listen to the voice of employees. So to have a two-way dialogue with colleagues to understand what is their lived experience, what's coming through staff surveys, what's coming through conversations. Are there patterns, and are there trends, and are there things that need to be addressed? And I would also say it's really important for the leadership to actually walk the walk and not just talk the talk. And when colleagues look at the leadership, it's important for them to see leaders who represent them. And we know that leaders have both visible differences and invisible differences, and that should reflect the employees. And I think it helps build trust, it builds confidence that anyone can get on and anyone can succeed in a particular organisation.
Fantastic. And are there any sort of practical examples you might be able to share in terms of how you have brought to life that consultation process, that listening, and that walking the walk, as you say, within the bank here?
So the bank very publicly published the court review of ethnic diversity, and we found that we were falling short in terms of making sure that colleagues of a minority ethnic background were having the same experience as colleagues of a white background. And we listened to staff, we looked at the data, and we looked at trends, and we looked at specific targets. And we have held ourselves to account in ensuring that we stick to our targets, and we listen not just to sort of what we might think the data is telling us, but also we listen to what colleagues are telling us and tell us, and also we look at the reasons why, for example, colleagues are leaving. We look at the types of colleagues who we are hiring across the board, and we also look at promotion rates. So those are things that we can sort of look at so that we can make informed judgments based on both the data as well as the actual on-the-ground feedback in terms of lived experiences that colleagues are facing. And it's through that that we believe we can start to move the dial and make progress. But it all comes back down to reflecting on, is there a challenge here? Is there an issue that we need to tackle head on? And what are we going to do about it? And to hold ourselves to account, which is what we're doing.
Oh, it's a super example. Thank you very much for that. And the nature of this engagement program that you've wonderfully articulated, presumably you're seeing benefit of that as it relates to engagement scores and so on and so forth as you consult with your people.
I would say it's a mixed picture in the sense that we listen to feedback and then we respond to it. But the feedback is naturally very mixed depending on the demographic that we receive feedback from. And in those instances, we try to have interactive sessions so leaders make themselves available. So, for example, Andrew Bailey, members of court, host coffee sessions where colleagues can sign up and say what's on their mind. We very much have a speak-up culture where people feel that they can say whatever they're thinking to the most senior leaders, and they will make the time to hear. And they will also come back and say, this is what we're doing with what we've heard. It's not that comments have just gone into a black box and nothing happens. Actually, there should be tangible action and there should be progress that we can demonstrate and hold ourselves accountable for.
Well, thank you, Afua. That's a lovely answer. I'm going to move a little bit now further to the future, and your own to-be list is as ambitious as all your achievements thus far. I'm keen to understand what's on that list today for your tomorrow, and what legacy that you hope to leave behind for the next generation of people, and particularly perhaps the Black and African leaders, and especially the women of the future, if I could put it that way.
Well, I would say I've never had a fixed plan. Opportunities have come up and I've gone with the flow, but what I have got is a very strong sense of purpose. I want to continue to work on things that have real impact and real influence and solve real problems. And in terms of legacy, I'd say if you can't see it, be it. And if you don't like it, change it.
Wonderful. Afua, thank you very, very much indeed. It's been an absolute delight to be able to welcome you to the Off the Agenda. You are an extraordinary role model. We wish you all the very best of luck with the Bank of England going ahead, and we thank you again for being part of Off the Agenda.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's been a real honour and privilege to speak with Afua today and to hear her remarkable story from Oxford and Princeton to global banking, and now at the heart of the Bank of England. Her journey of leadership, resilience and impact is truly inspiring. Thank you, Afua, and thank you all for listening. And that's all for me, other than to say, as always, stay tuned for more conversations, great discussions and inspirational guests. Thank you again, and bye for now.